Alright, here's the Unit 1 review. Go ahead and use this as the first part will be a little bit about the overall unit, what kind of we went through, the overview of the topics and sort of how they relate to each other. But before you do the review problems, you should have already completed and redone problems that we've done throughout the unit. So that's going to be really the best practice for yourself, of course, along with going over examples, looking at definitions. The discovery problems are also really helpful for kind of re-familiarizing yourself with why certain things work. So you should do that before using these questions as more of like a practice test. And at some point, probably on Monday actually, the solutions will, I'll put the solutions video up for that. First thing I want to do is talk a little bit about the overall unit, talk about the flow of the unit, and make sure that we're on track with how it relates to one another. So for the first 6 lessons or so, we talked about quadratic functions in context, worked a lot on graphing and finding roots in the vertex and the y-intercept in order to then answer some real-world questions that involved a quadratic function. We looked at the relationship between profit, revenue, and cost, writing a profit function, and then analyzing that profit function using what we know about quadratic functions. And then also fitting a function to some data. So if we had some data, we were able to look at it and decide whether we wanted to use a linear or a quadratic model, and then used a calculator to fit a function to that data and use that function to answer some more questions about the situation, maybe predict some future values. Then we moved on from quadratic functions in context to talking more about just quadratic functions and equations and analyzing and manipulating them. So we looked at quadratic functions with complex roots, talked about how the discriminant is important there. We solved systems of equations that involved quadratic functions. Remember, that was when we were finding the points of intersection between, for example, between a circle and a line. We looked at the vertex form of a quadratic function. We related it to the standard form, talked about how it's useful and in some ways how it's not as useful as standard form. We worked on some transformations of quadratic functions and then also even and odd functions, and that will be bridging us into the next unit. So obviously anything from the whole unit is could be on the test and most likely will be. And so in order to prepare, you should make sure that you've gone through each lesson, that you understand how to do all the problems from the lessons, from what we did in class, any tasks that we have. And then, and only then, should you go on to the review and try that as a final prep. So if you are still feeling shaky on stuff from the beginning of the unit, don't jump into the review problems right now. Go back, go through your notes. If you had questions about things, you can always go back and rewatch the video, or you can send me an email with questions, of course. That way when you go to the review questions, you'll be more prepared. I like to do is, if I were studying for this test, I would do just that. I would go through each lesson from the unit. I would redo problems maybe that I've starred or that look complicated, or in just all problems if I'm really struggling with something. Then after that, I would go and I would take the review questions as a test, see how I did. I will post the solutions to that at some point, probably not till either later in the weekend or on Monday, because that'll be our review day. And so you can take a look at those and compare and see how you did. As far as helpful tips for when you're actually working through problems, I can't say this enough. Practice understanding the problem. What are you trying to find? What is it that you know? Create a plan for yourself. Then follow your plan. If you're not doing that, you won't do it on the test, and you'll waste a bunch of time and probably won't get as many points as you'd like. So if you come across a question, maybe it's a long question, maybe you want to actually write out your understanding what am I trying to find, what am I looking for, and write out your plan. If it's something simple, make sure you just have a plan in your head and that you understand what you're looking for before you go into the problem. That will be very, very crucial. And in some cases, right, you'll actually be able to get more credit if you have a solid plan and an understanding instead of just a bunch of work scribbled all over your paper. Okay, so here I will now put the questions up for you to take a look at.